You got to take a lot of time first to understand your self-worth and do that self-work. If you're not confident in any way in who you are, then it's going to come across because when people are desperate or people feel that something has to happen, that's a big turnoff. A lot of times people will sink into themselves or they're overshare. What you have to be comfortable with is what would you want to have a conversation about or what would be meaningful for you? And how could you share that in a way that isn't too much that verbal diarrhea, but is just enough that you can spark some interest?
Leading and scaling a business isn't hard because you lack ideas. It's hard because your time, your team's time, and your focus get eaten alive by the daily grind. Too many leaders are overwhelmed, under pressure, and bogged down by low leverage tasks. I've learned this the hard way, scaling Nobody Studios, advising fast-growing startups and Fortune 500s, all while leading multiple ventures at once. I've seen firsthand how even the best executives get buried in meetings, lose strategic visibility, and burn out just trying to keep up. That's why I built the AI Executive Coaching Program, the same frameworks and tools that I've used in my own work to make it more meaningful, better leveraged, and more impactful. We're helping leaders in global businesses get hours back every week, turning chaos into clarity and operating with more leverage than ever before. This isn't theory. This is about identifying the traits you need to unlearn, the tasks pivotal to your success, and the tools that can be built into workflows to optimize your capabilities every day. From transforming meeting scripts into transcripts, into action plans, and spotting performance patterns you can't see on your own, we're upgrading the way executives lead. If you want to scale without losing your edge, let's talk. You'd be surprised how quickly you can lead at a whole new level.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode and it greatly supports our podcast. If relationships are the real currency of progress, why do so many of us invest in them like amateurs? Well, today's guest is someone who has mastered the art and science of purposeful connection. David Homan is the co-author of Orchestrating Connection, How to Build Purposeful Community in a Tribal World, and the visionary behind Orchestrated Connecting, a global ecosystem that fosters trust, generosity, and deep relation value across industries. But David is far more than a connector. He's a composer, a nonprofit leader, and strategic advisor who believes that relationships are built at the speed of trust and scaled through intentional design. In a world that tells us to network broadly and pitch endlessly, David teaches us to unlearn transactional thinking and instead build networks that actually work. Because they're rooted in shared values, real curiosity, and what he calls a give-give mindset. In this conversation, we'll explore how he turned small private dinners into a global leadership platform, how he engineers high-trust relationships between unlikely allies, and what it takes to build communities that don't just exchange value, but create it. If you've ever wondered how to build a community that matters, not just a contact list, you're about to find out all about it. So let's dive in with David.
I'd say that the real start of this, Barry, wasn't the start I thought it would be. Everything that you talk about in this podcast of what you need to unlearn, I had to unlearn how to network, who to focus on, how to have these conversations, and I had to embrace a whole different mindset of what real community building and connection could be. And what I didn't realize as I did it was that the people that I was looking for were the people most like me. Those anomalies in the room who read the room somehow end up talking to the right people and build a long-term relationship. And every one of them thought they were basically alone in this, maybe with a friend or two who might be a master connector. And then I realized, this is the impetus for the book, that the way I had heard them and synthesized their pain and shared experiences to help elevate this field of relationship building and relationship value, somehow I was sitting at the top as a guru, educating the people I admired, who I thought were much better and adept than I. And what I realized was that the deep listening skills, everything that I built out to network differently, were the exact skills I needed to hone to put myself in the shoes of somebody else and not just make them feel heard, but hone and elevate their game. And that's when I realized that what I had was something much greater than just a really great community of people, an empowering way to speak about honoring the chain of connections and relationships. And that's what, birthed the book, Orchestrating Connection, with the subtitle, How to Build Purposeful Community in a Tribal World.
Yeah, it's really interesting you talk about that, right? Like your inspiration is awfully something you're obviously observing in yourself, but you're maybe identified a deficiency in others. Many people, right, find it really hard when they hear the word networking. Like sometimes their skin starts crawling, or go to some events where they don't know anyone with maybe because they're maybe interested in a similar type of field, right? I see so many super talented people that really struggle with that. So what are some of the things that helped you build the mastery that maybe are intuitive to you, but we could help make intentional to others as they try to, step into this world? And everybody, I believe, wants purposeful connections and community, but some people don't know what the sort of patterns and the behaviors are. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I'll tell you this, I hate almost every event I go to. They're not designed for me, and I'm a master connector. So you want to talk about what we need to unlearn, right? Tell me, Barry, in your career, have you ever been to an event where you remember it because of the signature cocktail? Have you ever been to an event where the foliage on the tables made you think that you belonged? Right? Like, or like somebody gets up with a microphone and says, "You're all here. You're all amazing because I said so. And thank you for being here." And then you go back to some ambulatory wandering of figuring out who to talk to before you have to go pee. Like it is unfathomable to me that we've not evolved the way people need to meet when we know the power of introduction. So what I had to unlearn was, don't start an event with people coming together. Start an event with people going into small groups. That was innovation number one, right? I'm an event specialist. That's what built my network. People come to my events and they go every time. That was the best event I've been to. Not that week, the best event. And secret number one, you come in and I intentionally put you with a few people, as best as I can guess, I think you should talk to. And you start with that, with the structured icebreaker and conversation, usually very deep questions. And whether you're having a crappy day, a horrible day, more than that, your kid hit your knee, your mother's dying, you lost your job, you're getting it doesn't matter, because now you're in a shared conversation to elevate your group and therefore the room. I've been doing this for a decade amongst people who love my events and that they still don't copy it and use it. So few events actually bring you to the right people to start. It's what we go for, to meet that right person.
Yeah, no, I love what you're describing. Like a lot of these things, when you hear someone say it straight away, I'm like, that makes a whole lot of sense. Like I think any great experience, whether it's a product or, as you say, an in-person experience, the delightful moment very early is like one of the most powerful moments that you can create for people to make it memorable. But also some of the other nuances you're describing about starting small. So one of the huge things I always believe in is think big but start small.
Hmm.
People go to these events with big aspirations, but if you are in a big room, it's overwhelming, right? There's too many people. Where do I start? But if you start small, with one, two, four, whatever your groups are, this notion then of instantly having a great experience with a small number of people, and people are easier to open up and be vulnerable around. Again, another point you talk a lot about in the book is vulnerability. You can create that moment very quickly for people. And I think that is a very different experience than walking into the conference room with 200 people in there, and it's like going to a school disco when you're 16 and everyone's standing at the wall waiting for the first person to start dancing. Like that is again, even thinking about that,
Right?
I
Like
sort of start sweating.
who 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 doesn't cringe? I mean, that person who just has a great sense of their body and awareness and doesn't care, that person is an incredible type of person to work a room. But most of us go back to those social dynamics in middle school, high school, into college if we went. And in every situation we are, as my co-author Noah Askin calls it, we're just remixing. We gravitate to people that look like us, who talk like us, who we know, even if we don't really like them. And then we have the same stale conversation. So what we advocate in the book, right? Understand the diversity and culture of a room and approach people with curiosity and go fishing with vulnerability and see what happens if you open up a little bit to people you don't know and are curious about them. The ones you needed to meet will respond back to you in kind. And the ones that are just self involved or won't engage, they weren't your people anyway.
Yeah, no, I love this. So let's dive into this aspect too as well, right? Because that is also, again, a freeze moment, I think, for many people. Is like, how do you sort of get a few layers down from, hi, what are you doing here? My name's Barry, read my sticker on my badge. Like, tell us a little bit about how to set up that situation where you're leading with curiosity, with a little bit of vulnerability, that will actually, it might feel uncomfortable the first time you do it, but it's going to unearth higher quality, more meaningful connections. So tell us a little bit about some of the steps you've learned there.
You got to take a lot of time first to understand your self worth and do that self work. If you're not confident in any way in who you are, then it's going to come across because when people are desperate or people feel that something has to happen, that's a big turnoff. A lot of times people will sink into themselves or they're overshare. What you have to be comfortable with is what would you want to have a conversation about or what would be meaningful for you? And how could you share that in a way that isn't too much that verbal diarrhea, but is just enough that you can spark some interest? So I'll have an event, in this case, it's tomorrow night for me, and people are going to ask how excited I am about my book. And I'm going to smile. And for the ones that I really need to connect to, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm really glad I'm here, but I wish I was back with my dad in Florida where I grew up because his health conditions might have gotten to an extent where his quality of life is never going to be the same. That's a big share, right? Or how are your parents doing, Barry? What's really going on? Should they be living with them and family? Because if that's what's taking up your space, why do you want to distract it with talking about what happened with the sports team or some show you just watched? I could walk around and be like, I just started rewatching 24, and I was up early, jet lagged, and at the 3 a.m. California primary, I was watching it at 3 a.m. And you'll go, I remember 24 or Jack Bauer, and then that's it. But if the doors opened about taking care of our parents and what time we have with them, who can't respond to that? Who isn't dealing with it? You got to figure out what's real for you, but you just have to be courageous enough to share something in a subtle way. And I say it's fishing because sometimes you have to share two or three different things. But what's the worst that happens? If somebody said to me, I don't care about your dad, I'd go, I don't care about you. If somebody said, that's great, do you know any startup investors for me? I'd immediately write them off. Like we show our colors once we show our humanity. Everything else is subterfuge, and people are really great at faking it and connecting and making you feel valuable because they want something. Build a real connection, then build one more, then three by the end of an event. You've built three champions of who you are, who are then going to also network that room and possibly connect you to the person you were supposed to meet by taking the time to go out to that event.
So there's 2 points there that just really jump out at me, just listening to you straight away. The first one is being real. I think that is like one of the most powerful things people can be, is that their authentic self, right? Like being in a scenario as you've described, where you've got your book launch tomorrow, but you're what's really on my mind is this, and it's an authentic share. That's awesome. You know, I think it tells a lot. The response you get back to that, whether you get empathy, interest, or even if people don't have parents that are unwell, they can show empathy and say that must be tough. How are you dealing with it? And that you're into a real conversation. I think that's really important. But
And
the other
Barry,
thing,
it could take 20 seconds for that to happen. And then the rest of the conversation starts at that depth. This
right
doesn't
on.
take forever. It's an instant reaction. Do I feel heard? Is there empathy or not?
No, I love it. Yeah, and then the other point, uh, which subtly you shared, but just jumped out at me, was this notion that as you make connections with people in a room, that they are also going off to make connections, which will reciprocate potentially back to you in terms of if they understand what your interests are or what you're seeking, and they find those people for you, you've sort of activated this sort of army of to go out and source more potential connections for you because you were real and authentic with people. And that's something that really intuitively, now I hear you say that, that's something I think about a lot, is often when I meet people, if I have a real connection with them, and then 2 phone calls later, 5 people I meet later, I love that notion of joining dots with people to sort of, make better connections and better community. And that's super powerful. And I'll only do it for people that I feel are real or real with me, because that's the kind of people I want in my world. So it's another
Yeah.
nice point you're sharing. And but tell me more a little bit about that and how you became aware of that yourself.
So think about your reputation. It's not how you describe yourself, it's how other people describe you when you're not there. Now, what if you could imprint upon those people who do respect you, who help add to that reputation you've built, if the first thing they can do is describe what you've done to help them or somebody that they love and respect? You're instantly elevated to the next person they're sharing you to. And if you've been able to imprint in them what we call our impact ask, part of my orchestrated connecting community for a decade now, because the best givers on the planet also suck at asking for themselves.
Right on.
So if you've been able to imprint right, what's your passion? How is it amplified? And what connections do you need to move it forward? Once people get that, once people understand that you can build a reputation by doing good, and then you can ask clearly for your passions and how they're even greater than your own needs with them. Imagine what happens when you get that call because somebody who respects you was in the right room you weren't in, and all they can say is, David's a really great guy. He helped my cousin when he lost his job 2 years ago, and he's launching a startup, and he's going to try to systematically change the way we view relationships and trust. I think you should connect with him. He's doing a race. If that's to some investor and they look at what I'm building, which is my startup called SOAR, standing for Strength of Authentic Relationships. So SOAR Connect is the other thing I'm birthing at the same time as a book. I've gotten half my investors through referrals and word of mouth by somebody saying, I heard your value. My friend David has the same value, but I just don't want to introduce you to him. I want to tell you what he did for me or my friend. When you can live that way of respectfully building things relationally, then when a transaction occurs like that, as I've raised now nearly twice for my startup quickly, it comes because you built the relationship and you built your reputation with it, and you didn't expect something in return right away. That makes it a much better than just relationship karma.
Yeah, I do. I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. And again, another point you've mentioned just there is giving without expectation of receiving. One of the things I see a lot is that is a big tell for me. To your point about being inauthentic and real, it's this idea of if I give something, now the scoreboard is sort of you owe me one. This type of language. Um, for me, that's sort of a zero sum game. It's a zero sum, it's transactional type relationships, right? And I did a podcast with Brad Field, who's also written a great book called Give First. And, one of the nice aspects he talked about, and you talk a little bit about this too, in terms of your sort of relationship currency, he talks about this idea of positive sum, that it's not,
Hmm.
interactions are not for, to create win-wins either. It's actually just from even you and I doing this podcast, can we create something positive together? Now, it might have more impact for you or more impact for me, but what happens is it's a positive sum. It's a useful, helpful interaction that creates something more than maybe we could have created alone, which is again nice intent, right? And but there's no expectation that something has to happen now, or you've been on the show, so I need to be on your show, or these types of sort of zero scum, if you will, interactions. So how do you think about these two as well as you sort of start to talk about getting out of this sort of transactional relationships with people and building meaningful, I would argue, relationships with people or relationship value? I think as you describe it a little, talk to us a little bit about that, about how you think about it and how you create it.
Since your whole point is about what we need to unlearn, let me dig into that with what I had to unlearn in order to be effective. So, number one, I had to unlearn that if I built a relationship with somebody and I help them, that I should expect them to help me directly back. I had to give up on that because what I realized was the power of who they trust because I earned their trust was 100x greater than expecting something back from that one person. And so when you think about that strategically, if you've helped somebody or they've helped you and you want to call them up and you want to thank them, right? I used to have an incredible philanthropist who chaired international charity. And when every time somebody would call him up and ask him for a coffee, he'd call me up and he'd go, "How much do you think this is going to cost me?" Because the thank you was a guise for another ask. I called him up once when he helped me with a big project and I said, "Thank you." And he goes, And I was like, "Do you still want to get coffee?" He's like, "No, I'm hungry." I was like, "Great, let's go for food." We sat for an hour. I asked him how I could help him. He was like, "This was the first time in a year I've sat with somebody. They didn't expect me to pay for lunch and they didn't expect something from me." And I said, "That's a horrible way to live, that gratitude is under the guise of some sort of manipulation." And he's like, "What do you really need?" And I said, "I don't have a need right now. I'm in a place of abundance. I'm doing well with what we're doing. I'll let you know when I do." And the fact I didn't have an ask, and trust me, everyone has asks. I had asked, built a bond that lasted for 18 years of friendship and support in the hundreds of thousands of dollars because it wasn't transactional, even when it was relational. So I had to unlearn that when you express gratitude, that's the best opportunity to then ask for something.
All right. Well, one of the other aspects that isn't sort of in the book, but you've a great passion for it, is this idea. You're a trained musician, right? And this idea of using what you've learned in terms of orchestrating, if you will, a team of musicians, and how some of those principles and patterns play about how you orchestrate connection and people. So tell us a little bit about that. What was the inspiration behind it? I always love when people sort of can, take different domains and cross them into others and how it inspires them. So share a little bit about how your music background has helped you, bring it to this sort of forum of human connectivity and networking.
So the part that works and is in the book is that idea of orchestrating your life, orchestrating your community. We start off with an analogy of somebody getting ready to play a piano in a concert hall, but being unprepared and having the audience full of strangers. And we close with that opposite analogy. You're in the same conference hall and you're ready. And when you look out, all you see is a community of friends and supporters. And that's the difference of having achieved a purposeful community. So that part, the superficial part, everyone loved, including my editors and my co-author. The infamous, what we call chapter 5, which is no longer chapter 5 in the book, was me geeking out on the musicianship of this. So there are different terms in music that help you understand, like, the timbre of something, helps you understand when something is repeating, this idea of an ostinato pattern. When you start to look at in the science of conversations, little things like when you have a crescendo and you get louder and louder versus having a decrescendo, and that art of getting softer and softer. And I thought that it was a brilliant analysis, which may or may not have been the right call. I think it was probably the right call to cut it. Because listen, I'm a classical composer and no one listens to my music because people are happy enough to know I'm a composer. They don't actually listen, and the few that do don't share it because I write very private, romantic style classical music that you listen to on your own. So what happened was I wanted people to understand that we've created terminology in music for every part of the rhythm, the tone, the volume, every part of conversations of community, and that we could see it that way. You could be in my life right now for this podcast, and then we could lose touch for a year. And you could have been like the oboe or a bassoon in a Dvorak work that comes in once or twice, makes the work happen, but then doesn't come back to the same extent. Or you could be like my one of my best friends, Sunit Bhatt, who's on my startup board as well, who's like the cello in my life. He is always there, that low, beautiful harmony grounding me that is always present and always present in every part of the symphony. But for you, he could be that oboe, that piercing double reed that comes in, and it could, an oboe can sound above 100 string instruments equal. It's not about that shrill person. It's about that person, the thing they said mattered more than 100 people for that moment in your life. When you start to just look at this differently, we realize everything's been done. It's the sequence of how we do it that's different. And the musicianship I apply to this, we could take into a fine arts context. We could take into a myriad of different ways. I use music because in the end, the thing that works is I want to find the right resonance amongst people, the same way I want to find the right resonance amongst the instruments I compose upon every time I write a new work.
Look, you have me right. Like this is, I always love analogies. Obviously, sometimes can be dangerous, but they're also can be so creative to help people understand and inspire them around ideas that you're trying to convey. And especially because you're someone who is classically trained, the detail that you can get to bring that analogy to life is quite spectacular, to be honest. Because people can feel so many things as you're describing, right? Tone, sequencing, what type of instrument it is, the impact it has on an experience or a song, or when something's put together. I just think it's a really nice way to describe it. So tell me then, practically, to put that into action, right? I'm very happy to be someone's oboe anytime. That's always pretty fun. So, but tell me how you would think about just like putting something like that together in an event, right? There's probably a bunch of folks now who listen to the show. They're often senior leaders in these big companies. They want to put events or opportunities or experiences together where either they create great connectivity between people or they want to attend these sorts of things where they make great connections. So what's one or two little practical things where they can take that idea of orchestration and put it together so they can either participate or create these great experiences?
Later in the book, we go through an entire detail of what it means to build a purposeful community. Every business should be that. It doesn't mean everyone has to love each other or get along, but there should be an outcome and a reason for that business existing, for that startup being launched. And so when you talk about like everyone convening and what are the secrets they need, like question number one is why are you convening people? Why are you taking their time? What is the outcome that you want? Is it the synergy because of consultants to have a better team and culture? And therefore you take everyone out bowling when no one likes bowling? Is it going on some retreat where you do a trust fall, but no one would catch each other's back in the real world? Like, or do you figure out what people need? Do you create connections that seemingly may not be the right one? So the number two in a well-performing team meets the number one in a different team who becomes their mentor because they can't do it with their boss. And within 2 years, that mentee is the top performing third team because the executive team put together not just the C suite, but they put together their best performers in a pairing, in a group situation. You have to ask why, and everything's different. People don't ask why. They don't see what they want as an actionable outcome from an event. My events are really clear. I've done over 170 now in 10 years in 10 different cities, including the UK and Canada. I've done these with different cultures and taken my model into multiple groups of family office conferences, Impact and the rest. And the outcome is the same in every environment I go into because I dare people to be better versions of themselves and to be bold enough to ask for what they need and ask what other people need. And that is not novel, Barry, but it is insane that we live in a world where we want information, but we won't figure out what people are asking and how to match those asks together. That's how I orchestrate an event, knowing what people are asking. The startup that I've launched now that's come out of beta, it's an ask-based system. What do you need? Who can help you find what you need? And then how do you match those people with more people privately who are asking the same thing?
As you describe it, it does seem almost insane in a world where nobody can really complete anything on their own anymore. It's so complicated. You need help. It's impossible. And yet, as you say, people struggle to ask for help. People who give the most certainly don't often ask for anything. Or people just don't know how to make a good ask or share a clarity of their need. I think that's
We're
a skill where people really struggle with.
it's a skill that people struggle with because they have learned from takers who don't have that blockage the way that most of us who were givers do of how to actually ask. If I
Yeah,
come
very.
to you and go, I'm raising a startup, I need capital, a taker will ask that 1,500 times and raise millions of dollars. If a
Yeah,
giver asks that, we cringe every time we ask as if we are imposing on somebody when we often have greater value. But if we say, this is what we call the impact ask, this is my passion, here's what happens when it's amplified. And if you're up for connecting, these are the type of relationships I need to move it forward.
yeah, that's a nice pattern as well. I think where anytime you're talking from a place of again authenticity and being real about this is the mission I'm on, the thing I'm trying to create, the way you could support it. It doesn't feel like, to your point, when you are a giving person, it doesn't feel like you're asking in a way. It actually feels like you're sharing this sort of mission, opportunity thing that you're trying to create, and then inviting people to join it, should it be a fit for them. And it's interesting you described this because even for me, like starting startups, one of the most horrible parts of startups is fundraising. And for most people, the worst thing that they could do is ask their friends, their family, the people that they know for money when they're working on their idea. People find it incredibly hard. It's cringe factor 1000 to like ring up your best friend and say, "Hey, I've got a startup. Can you give me $100?" And it was interesting. One of the huge things I had to unlearn about doing that as an entrepreneur was it wasn't ever about asking people for money. That was never the thing about what fundraising is. What I've learned is it's actually sharing with people a little bit of like what you've described, like why I'm doing this, what's exciting about it, what if it works, what it will look like, why I'm inspired by this mission and the impact it could have. And then what I found is that the people who believed in the idea about what you were trying to create, of the
Yep.
effect that you were trying to have, they would say, that's something I believe in too. I want to see in the world. can I support that? And it was such a huge breakthrough for me because then you had people, if you will, the buy-in is to the mission, the vision, the effect that you want to have, rather than the buy-in is a physical cash that they have to buy in to actually be part of. Again, these are subtle things I've only learned, and by speaking to people like yourself and others, that's actually where the aha came for me, or the unlearning is when you are real and authentic about what you're trying to do and the effect you want to have, then it's an opt-in for people to say, I want to be part of that too. And again, they're the best people to have to be part of that mission because they're buying into the mission. They're supporting the mission. They want to see it in the world. And invariably, they're the best people to have with you on a startup because there's going to be rocky roads. Things will go up, things will go down. But it's a special sort of insight that I had to learn or unlearn, if you will, along the way.
It's a really important thing, the way you said that, the way you framed it. I have nothing more to add except for when you need to raise, build the relationships prior to that. It's worth the energy and the time. You may think you don't need it, but if you need the capital to continue, don't put your head in the sand until you're ready to look around and go, who cares? Who cares? Build a community of people around you who are part of that journey. And then when you get over that hump, which everyone has to, it's not, doesn't make it any easier, but it makes you feel accepted asking because you were literally just sharing the next step in your vision as opposed to demonstrating a need while catching up, while seeing how somebody's kids are, while seeing if they have capital, while learning about what they but you need the capital in 3 months or else. And it doesn't make sense to me that we wouldn't build the relationships first, because when everyone is on the other side of it, it's what we want. Don't just come to me for money. Ask me and show me in some way that you care about my life, not just about that checkbook. And we don't approach it this way because we think we only need to ask when we need something. That's the fallacy of it all. We need to ask when people believe we need it and want us to ask them.
So, looking forward, then, the last sort of conclusion of the book as well is the future of community. So, maybe I'd love to hear just a couple of your thoughts about where do you think the direction of community is going. In many ways, we seem to have like more isolation, more polarization than ever in the world at the moment. And community is such a foundation of really society. So what do you see the future of community looking like?
I think we're in an incredibly troubled moment in our history. I think that the way that politics have changed, the way that economics have changed, because I've been a student of power quietly my entire life. I did not come from wealth. I do not have wealth, but I've studied what makes the world tick and who makes the world tick. And at the same time, all the systematic change that has happened has come from incredible leaders who build community that move that ripple effect towards an entire wave or tsunami of change. And so my hope, and I am not sure if we're going to get there, is that that idea of tribalism, being you stick with the people who know you, who look like you, and that club, right? I grew up in the deep south, so that's called the good old boys club, and there's many variations around this planet of different variations of it. I believe that can change when the reputation of everyone who has power is now put into a more visible role, and what they do for our society and what we do to support the way the world works changes when we have tens of thousands of intentional communities that are there because of a shared vision and purpose, and then those can layer with each other and create a wheel that turns much stronger than what one person can do to control that.
Right on. It sounds fun and exciting, and certainly something I'd like to be part of. Listen, David, it's been great to have you on the show. The book, Orchestrating Connection, How to Build Purposeful Community in the Tribal World. Highly recommend people go out and grab it. I imagine you run these events now. I'm certainly curious to attend one of your events. How would people who are listening to the show potentially do that?
So I know you have a connector mindset, Barry, so that's easy because this is the network for connectors. It's private, it's invite only because I want to make sure everyone in the room is worth the conversation. But I run events right now in London, Toronto, New York, DC, Miami, Palm Beach, Austin, Dallas, San Francisco, and Los Angeles so far. The events are done at cost. I take no sponsorship. I charge no membership for my group. It's specifically for connectors. But I speak at different conferences. I go to other friends' events. I mean, there are hundreds of people in my network who run events as well. What I'd say is if somebody is a connector, they see the world in this way, I'm always open for a conversation. I didn't think that I was going to get to 1,000. Now I'm at nearly 2,200. And the term is action oriented natural givers that I would leave my children with. That's the code for my network. It's not your net worth. It's not your title. It's not who your grandfather was. It's not where you came from or how hard your life was. It's do you make introductions for people in that give and give mindset? And is this a community where you can thrive by helping and being helped? It's a very specific niche, but for me, it's a powerful one because it's all the trust makers amongst all the power on this planet working towards something greater than we can do on our own.
Well, power to that, David. Yeah, it resonates a lot. Thank you very much for being on the show. Again, look forward to everybody checking out this show and the book and hopefully making more meaningful connections with you and others. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or review as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com and we'll see you on the next episode.